This week's episode of Asian News Weekly is supported by EduTeach Microphones, creators of dynamic recording devices no bigger than your fingertip. EduTeach, boost your sound. Thailand's military declares martial law, China stands firm, and warning shots have been fired at North Korean ships. I'm Steve Miller. These stories and more are on the May 23rd edition of Asia News Weekly. Welcome to the show, everyone. Our first story this week brings you the latest developments from Thailand. Approximately 3 a.m. on Tuesday morning, Thai Army Chief General Prayut Chan-o-cha declared martial law. He said that martial law was necessary to address the deteriorating security conditions and prevent the use of weapons against civilians. Prayut pledged to facilitate peace and bring back the country to order. He asked the public not to panic and stated that this was not a military coup and that the Prime Minister was still in control of the country. The declaration of martial law removed the police and other agencies that haven't been effective in maintaining public security for the last 6 months. Prayut felt the declaration necessary after anti-government yellow shirt protesters overran a military base this past weekend and disrupted Prime Minister Niwa Thamrong's planning session for July 20th election. As Tuesday progressed, the military issued a number of edicts. Order number 5 appoints a supreme commander and commanders of the Navy, Air Force, and police as, quote, advisors. Order number 12 said that police and civil officials must continue to perform their normal duties. In addition, some broadcast outlets were issued directives to cease broadcasting. Reporters Without Borders noted, quote, the military intervention in the TV stations has been carried out in a completely illegal manner. If the army wants the media to provide the public with information, it just has to send them its statements. It does not need to take over newsrooms. Their correspondent also said that soldiers had taken up position around all TV stations, including those not being censored, in order to ensure the regular transmission of military communiques. As the day progressed, many shared their opinions via social media outlets. The International Commission of Jurists called for the revocation of martial law and restoration of media freedom in Thailand. Human Rights Watch said, imposition of martial law nationwide in Thailand was not necessary to prevent further violence and was effectively a coup that threatened the human rights of all Thais. I recently spoke to a colleague in Bangkok to get their opinion. The individual's voice in the following clip has been altered to protect their identity.
This is a typical technique of our country to take off power from the government. To everyone, this is no surprise. It's a new term for the coup d'etat. It seems to be our country's style. The military came out to prevent further conflict between the two groups. We are a peaceful country and there is no hidden agenda.
Foreign Ministry spokesman Sek Wanamete said, the martial law is to maintain peace and order, for us government agencies to resume our work in an effective manner, to serve the public, and to ensure that the general public can lead their normal lives in Bangkok and across the nation. Wednesday afternoon, a meeting was held between major parties in an attempt to breach the current impasse. Although it was reported that Prime Minister Niwa Thamrong did not attend the session, an opposition member, Seri Wongmonta, was taken into custody at Suvarnabhumi International Airport on insurrection charges. Preliminary results of the meeting yielded no concrete results, which actually was to be expected. However, both sides were issued homework to continue the process moving forward. The groups were scheduled to meet once more on Thursday as this podcast was moving into production. Orders issued by the military also instructed both sets of protesters to remain in their compounds and refrain from marches. Concern from overseas also seems to be mounting, as Malaysia has warned its citizens to avoid travel to Thailand if at all possible, and they may not be the last ones to do so. Some in Thailand also fear that if elections are further delayed, the EU and others may begin boycotting the nation. As for the general public, nothing seems to have really changed. The Associated Press even noted that some in Bangkok were using the opportunity to pose for pictures with the soldiers out on patrol. While I'm not completely sold on all pieces of the imposed martial law, and do consider it a form of coup, the reality of the situation is that nothing positive has been achieved in the past 6 months of protests, and it was poised to get worse. A stronger hand was needed to get both sides to sit down and begin fruitful discussions, and that appears to be happening. As long as the military stays true to its word, this may be in fact the only option to bring about a peaceful resolution. But my question for you is this: do you think the move to impose martial law was the right one? Is this what was needed to bring about a conclusion to the 6 months of protests without further violence? Or will this lead to further havoc? Leave your thoughts on our page or reply via social media. As more events unfold, be sure to follow our Twitter account @AsiaNewsWeekly, as it's the most effective way to disseminate information. Coming up later in the program, the cult followers of the Sewol ferry owner try to keep him out of prison. Chinese President Xi Jinping warned Asian countries against forming alliances this past Wednesday. The remarks were made in Shanghai at the Conference on Interaction and Confidence-Building Measures in Asia. Quote, "We should stick to the basic norms in international relations, such as the respect for the independence of sovereignty and integrity of territory, mutual non-interference into internal affairs. We should respect the political systems and development methods different countries choose willingly. We should respect and look after the reasonable security concerns of every country. It is disadvantageous to the common security of the region if military alliances with third parties are strengthened," Xi said. The third party Xi is referencing is most likely the United States. Now, this statement was made after China sent 2 additional armed naval vessels to guard an oil rig being deployed in Vietnam's territorial waters, also claimed by China. The vessel arrived and unveiled their weapons, intimidating Vietnamese fishing vessels in the nearby vicinity. In response, Vietnamese Prime Minister Nguyen Thanh Dong has threatened legal action and said Vietnam was resolute in its determination to defend its sovereign territory. The United States also commented on the matter. "We consider that act provocative, and we consider it one that undermines the goal that we share, which is the peaceful resolution of these disputes and general stability in the region," and that was from White House spokesman Jay Carney. In the wake of the violent protests last week, China evacuated more than 3,000 citizens living in Vietnam. China's official Xinhua news agency said that the evacuees also included 16 nationals critically injured when Vietnamese protesters rampaged through foreign-owned factories. In addition, nearly 6,000 Taiwanese nationals also left the country and prompted a call for an apology from the Vietnamese government for the destructive riots. Vietnam Prime Minister Dong warned protesters to act within the law while staging demonstrations and said, quote, "Bad elements should not be allowed to instigate extremist actions that harm the interests and image of the country." End quote. Now, China is using the incident to put possible trade pressure on Vietnam, noting the incident, quote, "has hurt the Chinese people's feelings and affected the confidence of Chinese and Vietnamese enterprises," end quote, said the Commerce Ministry's head of foreign trade, Zhang Ji. Zhang further said, quote, "This would definitely damage the healthy development of Sino-Vietnam trade, which China does not want to see, and will also be detrimental to the Vietnamese economy," end quote. Now, this is also while Hong Kong's Singdao Daily reports a large number of the People's Liberation Army troops have been spotted heading towards the China-Vietnam border, a report that China denies. This is only one of the many volatile issues affecting the region, and has also been overshadowing other developments, such as Japan's military drills in the regions, and the announcement it plans to place more outposts in the region. If you would like more information on this story or any of the ones mentioned in this week's podcast, head over to AsiaNewsWeekly.net. There you will find a minute-by-minute rundown of when all the stories appear in this episode. While there, you can leave your thoughts in the comment section or do it via Facebook or Twitter. Those feeds also get posted with new information throughout the week. Just go to facebook.com/AsiaNewsWeekly or follow @AsiaNewsWeekly on Twitter. The United States has indicted 5 Chinese military officers for cyber espionage, something the Chinese government calls absurd. Attorney General Eric Holder said those accused hacked into American businesses and entities, including U.S. Steel Corp., Westinghouse, Alcoa, Allegheny Technologies, the United Steel Workers Union, and Solar World. According to reports, the accused stole trade secrets that would have been, quote, particularly beneficial to Chinese companies at the time that they were stolen, end quote. The Attorney General said that he hopes the Chinese government will work with American officials to bring the offenders to justice and that the United States intends to prosecute. Some have called the United States hypocritical in wake of the NSA scandal, but let's face it, every government spies. Governments conduct cyber espionage, and if you're going to play the game, you need to be willing to pay the price if you're caught. You could argue that this is a case of intellectual property theft and not true espionage, but when it's state-sponsored, is there really any difference? The United States has voiced concerns to China in the past regarding attempts to infiltrate networks, but it appears that those concerns were not addressed by Beijing and contributed to the decision to bring about these indictments. It's unclear how or if this will affect U.S.-China relations, but for now, it's a sensitive issue. Quote, "We remain deeply concerned about Chinese government-sponsored cyber-enabled theft of trade secrets and other sensitive business information for commercial gain," said State Department spokesperson Jen Psaki. She went on to say, and again, this was specific to the actions of just a few individuals, and we hope that the Chinese government can understand that. Psaki further added that this was a law enforcement issue and not a diplomatic one. Now, those are nice words, but I doubt China will treat it any other way. In a tearful nationally televised speech Monday, South Korean President Park Geun-hye apologized once more for the government's response to the Sewol ferry tragedy. She announced plans to dismantle the nation's Coast Guard and to strengthen professionalism and responsibility of those involved with coastal safety. Park said that the government will transfer the investigation and intelligence functions of the Coast Guard to the National Police Agency and the rescue and security function to the newly created Ministry of National Safety. Park's announcement came after rallies were held in Seoul this past weekend, where protesters numbered up to 30,000 by some accords. To those charged in the accident, the Korean legal system may be failing them, as lawyers struggle to find ways to defend the 15 crew members currently being held responsible. They note it's nearly impossible to mount a defense when the case has already been tried in the public, and those accused haven't been given the opportunity to respond. But this situation really isn't to be unexpected. After all, the president did call them all murderers immediately following the accident. One lawyer, appearing for one of the crew members in a hearing held behind closed doors to decide the validity of the arrest warrants, confessed to being torn between professional obligation and the resignation that lawyers could not make any difference amid a nationwide witch hunt. Quote, "It is a burden for every lawyer, because the crime is something that can hardly be forgiven." End quote. However, some being sought for the ferry sinking are still at large. Yoo Byung-eun, the owner of Chung Hae-jin Marine Company that operated the Sewol ferry, was summoned to court last week for questioning, but failed to show. It's believed Yoo retreated to his religious compound to hide. Hundreds of his cult followers came to his aid and barricaded the gates to protest the government's actions. Prosecutors finally gained access to the compound Wednesday to search the over 750,000 square meter retreat. The search lasted several hours, but turned up nothing. It's now believed Yoo has left the area several days prior and is now residing somewhere in Seoul. The search has turned into a massive effort, despite no formal charges being filed against Yoo. Prosecutors simply want to talk to him, and he's avoiding them at all costs. In fact, recent documents show that days after the ferry sinking, he shifted his wealth to the church in what's being painted in the public as a shirking of financial responsibility towards the victims. Now, revisiting President Park's decision to dismantle Korea's Coast Guard and farm out its operations to the National Police Agency and the newly created Ministry of National Safety, I want to ask you, do you think that that's the right call? If lack of training, procedures, resources, and the like led to this disaster, how can breaking apart a single unit address those concerns? The government should be applying additional resources to the problem to shore up shortfalls, and not create additional bureaucratic layers that may impede much needed reform. But what are your thoughts on the issue? Is Park moving in the right direction, or is another course of action wiser? In just a few minutes, how online television is changing the landscape of China. But let's take a break from the news for a quick message from this week's sponsor. For the past 7 years, I've been uploading video blogs to YouTube, and my current camera of choice is the GoPro Hero. I just love how small and compact it is. It's great for capturing my thoughts in and around me, and its wide angle of view is ideal for interviews. But anyone who knows anything about video understands that onboard microphones usually just don't cut it. So enter Edutej. It's a Korean company that creates tiny fingertip-sized microphones that are actually perfect for the GoPro. I've been using the ETM001 for 2 years, and I'm completely satisfied. The ETM001 is compatible with all GoPro Hero cameras, although you will need a mini USB adapter if you're using a 3 or 3 Plus model. Now, if you have a GoPro and you're looking for a great external microphone, check out the ETM001. You can get more information about this microphone by visiting edutej.com. That's EDUTIGE.com. Now, this is a Korean company, so a lot of the website is largely in Korean, but don't worry. Hit that contact button and fire off an email to one of their regional managers, and they'll be sure to help you. Edutej, boost your sound. When I lived in the United States, I'd always joke with my wife and tell her that after a long, stressful day in the office, I wanted to do nothing else but sit down, plug into my game console, and kill a few people. It was a healthy way for me to unleash some of the pent-up frustrations that had built up during the day when I was competing in multiplayer combat matches. It was just a great way to unwind. However, a Chinese student recently took things a bit too far. On May 9th, dorm staff noticed blood under the student's door. Now, the door was locked at the time, so the staff member called the police. When they arrived and the police kicked open the door, they found one of the students lifeless on the floor, surrounded by a pool of blood, and the other in a corner. According to the initial investigation, the incident was sparked by a video game, said the school's spokesperson. Apparently, after 3 consecutive losses, an uncontrollable amount of anger raged through the surviving student as he slashed his roommate with a fruit knife. Now, police have not made any formal announcements or confirmed exactly what happened beyond the initial facts. And some experts in China have already announced that League of Legends violent content may have caused the incident, much the same way that many in the United States say violent video games cause violent acts. Now, the truth of the matter is that there is insufficient data to make such a claim. It's far more likely that other psychological factors or emotionally challenging issues were at play than the sole influence of a video game. Now, let's go back to my youth. I grew up playing Army, racing around my neighborhood with guns and quote-unquote killing my friends. We watched violent movies. We played violent video games. And you know what? We all turned out fine. While violent content can impact someone, I don't see it being the sole cause for events like these. There have to be other factors that come into play. Where do you weigh in on the topic? Do violent video games cause violent behavior, or is there another explanation? If you believe the latter, what do you think causes actions like these? Let me know your thoughts on our website, Twitter, or Facebook pages. 2 North Korean patrol boats and 1 government ship crossed the northern limit line, the maritime border between the 2 Koreas, Tuesday afternoon at 4 p.m. A nearby South Korean naval vessel quickly responded to the incursion by firing 10 warning shots, and the vessels retreated an hour later. Since the border is unmarked, it's not entirely unheard of for North Korean naval or fishing boats to cross the boundary, and North Korea does not recognize the northern limit line. The area saw a deadly skirmish in 2009 when the DPRK shelled Yongpyong Island. Wednesday evening, the DPRK issued statements vowing to wipe out Park Geun-hye-led military hooligans to the last one, and that the actions of the South Korean Navy were a deliberate, grave, provocative act of firing bullets and shells, and that the KPA now consider all South Korean vessels legitimate targets of physical strikes, which should be blown up without fail. Unfortunately, comments such as these are routine, and while it did come from the command unit in the area, probably isn't anything more than a verbal response after having 3 of their boats caught going across the border. Overall, the situation in the area hasn't changed, and the comments from the KCNA are most likely the same rhetoric we've seen for years. China has nearly 450 million online video viewers, which is about 80% of the internet-connected population. That number is expected to grow to 700 million by 2016, according to Shanghai-based iResearch. The era of online television has arrived. The next step for video services is distributing original content. Chief of Video Section at Sewol, Shang Na, said at a forum in southern China's Jiangxi Autonomous Region. Some of the top shows showing in China are Absolutely Unexpected, which is streamed by Youku, that has an audience of about 500 million views since 2013, and Dior's Man, a Chinese sketch comedy show produced by Sewol, garnering about 1 billion views. Video streaming sites like Youku, Sina, and Sohu show dramas and comedies from the United States, South Korea, and Europe, but they continue to face stiff control from the government. The State Administration of Press, Publication, Radio, Film, and Television ordered Dior's Man to be removed from Sohu on April 29th, in addition to 4 other United States television shows, although reasons really weren't specified. The office has also stepped up its campaign to, quote, clean the web and crack down on obscene material, and so far has shuttered more than 100 websites and over 3,000 social media accounts. In a nation that continues to wire itself for the 21st century, I find it odd that governments try to police what's available. Since the dawn of the internet, people have found ways around blockades to get their illegal materials. In fact, the only way to prevent a computer from reaching the internet is to unplug it. South Korea also has a similar internet police that tries to block porn from being seen in the nation, as well as websites from North Korea. The program says it's very effective, noting how many sites it blocks from internet service providers. But to be perfectly honest, in just a few minutes, someone can install a VPN and circumvent the authorities, making all their actions fruitless. So I ask you, should governments continue to attempt to censor the internet? Or is it wiser to promote responsible behavior? Those are all the stories for this week's episode, but before we go, let's take a quick look at some of the comments you left last week. From Moss Spider, telemedicine is great. Where great distances keep people separate, emergency specialists need to be consulted on their expertise. This gives the local GP confidence in having another doctor to compare ideas and get the support they need, because there is just not enough time to rush them to a trauma tertiary hospital when the clinical presentations do not permit. Turner Wright wrote in regarding the Sewol ferry, I personally don't think any changes will be forthcoming. There have been numerous opportunities to counter that me first, do everything quickly, and let the chips fall where they may mentality in Korea for years. For example, the Sampung department store. Although there have been improvements, the underlying sentiment is still the same. Waterflows added, Korea is a goal-driven society, and what I mean by this is that it doesn't matter how the goal is reached, as long as you reach the goal. In Korean society, the process of how you get to a goal is not really important as long as you reach the goal. So with that being said, if things are goal-driven, there is bound to be factors that are overlooked or shortcuts taking place to reach the goal. I wouldn't necessarily put all the blame on culture, but I can certainly see it being a factor. I would say it's more of not looking at other possibilities or outcomes. In Korean society, the question of what if this doesn't go as planned really isn't thought about. Everything is expected to go as planned. And finally, Annie Kim tweeted, my guess, a culture driven by success. Time for the entire nation to do some serious soul searching to change the culture. As always, I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts with me, and you can do that via our website, on Facebook, or through Twitter. I'd like to send out a huge thank you to our sponsor this week, EduTeach microphones. Again, if you have a GoPro and are looking for an awesome microphone, check out edutige.com. That's EDUTIGE.com. I use their mics not only on my GoPro, but also with my iPhone and iPad. I'd also like to send a special thank you to Y Bong, who made a donation through our website in support of the podcast. And if you have any feedback about what we do here every week, you can send me a message through email. The address is podcast@asiannewsweekly.net. And as always, you can download each and every episode from our website, but you can also stream them through iTunes or Stitcher Radio. Well, that's it for this week. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Steve Miller, and until next time, stay true to yourself and always be awesome. Asian News Weekly is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License.